I have often asserted that during the vapor canopy, it's very hard for people to die. Under perfect, pristine vapor canopy conditions, the human avatar is operating phenomenally, healing absolutely fast because of the oxygen, the diet, everything, the atmospheric pressure. You heal so fast. This is why the story of Cain and Abel, the very first murder, was very special to the ancient world, but today it doesn't mean nothing to us. People get killed every single day. But in that story, it had a particular significance that's being overlooked. And that significance is under the vapor canopy, if you kill somebody, you had to work for it. It's not an accident. You had to really work for it because they're already healing as fast as you hurt them. So this is exemplified in the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, outside the context of vapor canopy, much of the book of Revelation doesn't make sense. And the book of Revelation is cross-referenced with First and Second Esdras, which are both highly prophetic and explain the changes in the human body that are going to occur during the tribulation period. So the vapor canopy is explained with the return of the phoenix in 2040, the sixth seal. But even after that, everything is reduced by a third. The sun, the moon, the stars, the day, the night. Vapor canopy has reduced everything. But it also states in the tribulation record of the book of Revelation that people will seek death and not find it. So we have these. This is what I'm just providing context to what he's referring to, and what he's referring to is in the year 522 AD. It is the only year in human history the Nemesis X object and the Phoenix phenomenon occurred in the same year. Nemesis X is on its own chronology of 792 years. Its next appearance is in 2046. Phoenix is on its own chronology of every 138 years, but every 552 years, it's a big one. Well, 552 AD, the Roman Catholic Church, after everything was done and said, after 25 years, the Roman Catholic Church was able to repackage everything that happened. But this is what happened. The Phoenix phenomenon appeared, volcanoes went off all over the world, and it started what is known in the historical record as the Justinian darkness. 25 years of tsunamis, earthquakes, things falling out of the sky, the UK getting wiped out, half of North America getting wiped out, whole populations coming up vanishing. Some people believe the vanishings happened by the ground shaking so much, whole populations in their cities just sank into the ground like subsidence. So 522 is terrible. And we have many references as to what happened in the historical record. And remember, if something is true somewhere, it is probably true everywhere. And the reason I'm saying that is that for every historical reference that we find of something that is particularly heinous like this, you can imagine how many references didn't make it to the present, how many other texts that are lost that we don't have access to. This was terrible. It was described throughout the entire world. 522 was a 522, 523, 524. Sky dragons appeared in the sky. All this is described. I've got a whole list of stuff on my channel describing and with all the sources of what happened. Vapor canopy came back, but it was only here for 25 years. Exact blueprint for what happened on that same timeline, because 552 years before that was 31 BC when the Americas were all destroyed during the Battle of Actium, when a great red sky dragon appeared over Egypt, and there was all kinds of fallout. It was the worst. It was the worst earthquake that ever afflicted Olympia, Greece, and Jerusalem in their histories. This is 31 BC. During the Civil War, Queen Cleopatra and Antony against Octavian. So 552 years before that was 583 BC, when Thales of Miletus had predicted the sun was going to darken, and he was dead accurate. 552 years before that was the complete destruction of Atlantis, the invasion of the sea peoples called the Tuatha Danann that invaded Ireland, and 552 years before that was 1687 BC, which was also a 25-year darkness called the Ogygian deluge. So the Roman Catholic Church had altered had altered the calendar, and they published this, and I published it on my channel. They literally published that they removed the old calendar of 552 years. This is what they said. And they had this guy, Dionysius Exiguus, create a new calendar. He is an agent of Rome. He was a translator of 3 or 4 different languages. He was a scholar. They had him invent a new calendar to hide this old calendar. His new calendar backdated all the way back to 2 BC, where he thought Jesus was born. This is what he did. This is a 522. He invented this calendar supposedly in 526, but there are no records anywhere in the world of this calendar until after the year 1000. So we have a huge discrepancy here, but what we do have are the historical records that the Catholic Church hid that Phoenix timeline. So what happened during that 25-year darkness is only speculation. But if we're going to go with the historical precedents, then we had the return of a vapor canopy with high concentrations of volcanism. So if the same thing happened at the flood, creating titans, giants, and all that. Same thing happened at the Ogygian deluge for 25 years. It gave birth to another age of heroes recorded by Hesiod. Heroes and giants that died on the field of battle during the 7 against Thebes, and then 30 years later during the Trojan War, the 10 years of the Trojan War. Then 25 years of darkness during the Justinian plagues. Then the 25-year darkness period of the Justinian plagues absolutely answers for us many of the Tartarian anomalies that are being published widely. This is your area. This is your massive Tartarian destruction here in 522. This is where the history of the world was literally rewritten, and we're missing whole centuries called the Dark Ages. That the Old Testament story of the Israelites going in, commanded by Moses to kill children, women, and even the animals and livestock with the men, is a psyop. Every bit of that is a psyop. And the justification that is given in the religious context is that, oh, they're Nephilim, therefore they're the sons of Satan. They're not purebloods. Listen, all that is just religiosity. We have no evidence at all that angels came down and had sex with humans. That is not, that right there is totally of Babylonian provenance. It is an invention. Scientifically, we have a totally different phenomenon unfolding. We don't have evidence of angels or angelic beings or aliens coming down and having sex with humans. Anything that has copulation with a human female must be genetically compatible with that human female. Therefore, the gods must be human. So, taking that into consideration, we don't have stories from the mythological record of this type of contact. This comes from the religious texts. What we do have, though, is in 1902, 2 scientists exposed to ambient radiation on the island of Martinique after Mount Pelée exploded. Both of these men, 58 years old and 61 years old, they both grew 2 inches. They grew 2 inches because there is something about ambient radiation that comes from volcanoes that makes plants and beetles and insects and all the flora and fauna on these tropical islands and stuff grow so fast after a volcano blows up. Imagine a world that ultraviolet light is absolutely filtered out by a vapor canopy that increases atmospheric pressure, which increases the amount of oxygen that you just breathe naturally. All the animals are huge. The plants are gigantic. Oxygen is everywhere. The atmospheric pressure is so intense, but you don't feel it because you're born under those conditions. And you can inhale and then dive underwater, and you can go 300, 400 feet down, and you can get clams what we can't reach today. But we know they did because we found those middens, those pearl beds. They used to do it, and they did it because the atmospheric pressure was differently, meaning the human body could take a lot more pressure deeper underwater because they were used to it, and the water itself didn't have the pressure it does today. With a decrease of pressure in the air, the pressure is increased in the water. It is just the opposite in the vapor canopy world. In the vapor canopy world, there are no ice at the poles. Those are dry land masses. And we know this because we have the maps from the 14th, 15th, and 15th century that show the islands and rivers and lakes in Antarctica. And we have commiseration from the U.S. Navy that has even said that these maps are dead reckoning for what subsurface interface radar has shown where those mountain ranges and rivers are 2 miles under the ice caps. So when you put all these details together, we have religionists who created a story to justify how gigantic humans came into existence. But in the Greek, in the ancient Greek text of Sanchoniathon and Hesiod, we don't have angels having sex with humans in order to produce giants. We just have an old world that was suddenly destroyed, called the Age of the Titans. And the survivors of that Titan world had kids. And when they had those kids, their kids were considered giants. They were nowhere near as big as the Titans. And when those giants had kids, they were normal-sized humans. So in the ancient Greek traditions, we have a single generation after a cataclysm when Typhon, which is the phoenix, destroyed the world. When it destroyed the world, it left some Titans couldn't breathe. They died out. None couldn't get enough oxygen. The giants never feared the Titans because the Titans couldn't move like the giants could. They were born under the new conditions, but they had pre-flood antediluvian genetics. So they were still huge. It was when the giants gave birth, they gave birth to regular sized humans. This is the story we find also in the Sumerian records. We have actual legislation in cuneiform from when it was necessary to pass laws against the Lugalum. The Lugals were called the Big Brothers, and they were sparse and far and few between, but it seemed that they got the better of the business deals, corporate deals, signing contracts, deeds, titles for lands. All this stuff is mentioned in the Sumerian cuneiform. But they had to pass laws because as people multiplied, they kept looking these gigantic men called the Lugals. They became a problem. People were intimidated by them. So when we put all the little pieces together from all over the world, this is what we get. We don't get angels having sex with humans. We get a world where everybody and everything was bigger. And then that world was gone and things got small real quick. And evidence that cataclysms are what does this, that increased volcanism is what creates giantism. More evidence is also found in the Greek because Hesiod mentions that Typhonius attacked and Zeus took care of him and fought him off. But it began another age of heroes. How did that happen? How all of a sudden could all these giants appear that were problems all of a sudden, and these giants fought on the Trojan battlefield? Every bit of this is recorded. How did another age of giants happen when the cataclysm was way in ancient times and Typhon only appeared for a short time? Well, this is what we have, 1687 BC, the Ogygian deluge. I have 5 videos about it showing how the phoenix appeared and created a 25-year darkness, and volcanoes were erupting everywhere. One of the main ones is known to science called the Avellino eruption. It was right then, 1687 BC. This is what brought the new age of giants back. It didn't bring titans, but it brought a new age of giants, but it was short-lived. And humans were already there were so many humans that it was relatively easy in the 13th century BC during the Trojan War, the invasion of the Sea Peoples, to go ahead and eradicate the last races of the giants. And this is where we find in the Old Testament where the giants of the Philistines were only of the remnant of the giants. The actual races of giants were gone. Goliath had 3 sons. One of them had 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. Goliath had 2 other sons. They're also mentioned as fighting on the battlefield, but they're all called the remnant of the giants. So anyway, to answer your question, putting it all together, environmental factors are what caused giantism. And it was somebody in Babylon who invented the idea that angels had sex with human women to create a giant.